carry on for 2023 with an attitude of kayotsaga, using the term from the Jains or Jaina. This is the Sanskrit name of the tradition. So in the Jain tradition, kayotsaga means kaya, body, ut, like chucking off, utsaga, to expel the body, you see, forcefully. And now that has lots of meanings, but we'll explore those as we go along. But they're all good, positive. Arms by the sides, feet parallel. Drop the shoulders, jaw soft, eyes soft, brain soft. Breathing natural. A little moving left, a little moving right. And you might just feel awareness spontaneously arising at the pelvic floor. That usually comes when we're relaxed, as we are, because we're friends practicing together. When we're investigative, so the movement is how we explore. And then out of those two factors comes this spontaneous awareness of the conversational tone of the pelvic floor. So conversational tone of the pelvic floor, the muscles of the pelvic floor are in a conversation rather than a monologue with the way the back is. So that's a responsive experience. And we're just going to let the arms float as if there are balloons underneath each arm that are inflating. So there's a degree of selflessness. And as you get about halfway up, begin to turn your palms forwards. And when you're comfortable, upwards. And eventually the hands come together. We make sure the upper fibers of the trapezius, which are known as the descending fibers, are not tense. So we know the body and the mind are the same thing. We've known that forever in our own experience. In Vajrasati Yoga, we've always taught like that. And I was interested today to listen to a BBC radio program about how completely interdependent the mind and body are. So, everyone agrees. So if we agree on that, then the way we move affects the muscles. In other words, the attitude is very important, essential, one could say. Even doctors on this BBC thing I listened to today said that the most important factor in any illness and its and pain in its getting better is the mind. Okay, big wide circle, hands to the heart. Deep breaths. And then just let's tune in again on the feet, ranging right, ranging left, ranging forwards, ranging backwards, investigatively, relaxed. I was going to say relaxedly. It's not a word, is it? But anyway, and with the breath flowing. So just those basics, investigative, breath-centered. Of course, Buddhism was one of India's greatest exports, or South Asia, I should say, greatest exports. Of course, the Buddha wasn't born in what we now call India, but was born in what we now call Nepal. And the focus of the Buddha is on this sort of Buddha, awakeness. So we're feeling this awakeness coming at the pelvic floor spontaneously. Interlace, stretch your arms down, and then raise them up. So your fingers are interlaced. And again, we're going to look for flow. Vahi in the Sanskrit language, one of the words for flow is vahi. And it's investigative. And this is, very much the foundation of Buddhism, investigation. And nearly always in early Buddhist texts, there's this sort of preamble that says inviting teachings that invite investigation. So investigation is a lovely visceral experience in yoga. You sort of feel into it. So movements that conduce to feeling into it will also conduce to a sense of release that is expressive of a mind that's coming out of doubt and into direct knowledge. Big wide circle when you're ready. Hands to the hips this time. And take deep breaths with a wide, broad collarbone area. Soft eyes, soft brain. Again, still relaxed. Relaxed enough not to feel you've got to formalize what we're doing in any way. It's just relax. It's just us friends together. And then we're going to step the feet when we're ready, when you're ready, comfortably, relaxed apart, hands on the hips, that lovely wide chest. breath that's expressive and honest. Left toes in, right foot and leg out on the ball of the foot, finish off the turn on the heel. That should ensure the alignment we want, which is heel to arch. Another alignment, which would be okay, would be heel to toes or even further forwards. But anything back towards, you're bringing your heel back towards the heel, we don't want that. Okay, raise your arms. Breathe easy. As we bend the front knee, feel energy moving in two directions, opposite directions. So bend the front knee, and some of us find utility in bending and extending several times to feel our way into it. And enjoy this, this expansion in two directions. And enjoy the opportunity to investigate, to tune in, you could say. Eventually, we're going to bring the elbow down, palm up. We're going to look up, stretch up. It's okay to have the hand on the hip. You don't have to stretch up. It's okay to stretch up and or over. So there's lots of possibilities. You can have the arm up, you can have it up and over, you can have it down on the hip. You can even have it round and holds the bent leg thigh. So those are all, potentially good options. And it's good here is qualified by what opens up your breath. So play, breath, enjoyment, relaxation, love. Okay, arm down, palm down, push into the leg, inhale. Super. Coming up, hands on the hips. Let's all take some deep breaths together. So it's lovely just to allow that feeling. It's like a relief, isn't it? Just as the breath circulates the prana, the energy, the life force around. So pra plus ana. Pra means forth, ana means breath, breathing forth. So it's life force as equated with the breath. Back toes in, front foot and leg out on the ball of the foot, finish off the turn of the heel. So you've got that heel to arch alignment, worth double checking, I think. Relaxed and calm and investigative, therefore enjoying. We're going to feel that this energy circulates outwards as we raise our arms up. Perfect. Good job. Lift your chest to lift the ribs, to stretch the lower back. Relax so that we can get this listening, responding biofeedback loop, which we also call meditation. Meditation just means absorption. So it's where one thing and another thing come so close that they are one. Like when two people, really know each other, if they're dancing or walking or cooking together or whatever. Inhale, exhale, bend your knee, front knee that is, and play investigatively. Really opening your chest if you want, if it feels like it just nudges your edges a bit in a good way. And elbow down, palm up. Option to have the hand down, to have the hand up, to have the hand up and over, or to have the arm around. It's hard to see on the screen, but my hand's appearing here. That's not suitable for many people. Perhaps people with long arms would find that suitable. But suitable here means it's the appropriate position to conduce to a release of the tension that's driven by not knowing the interdependent field. In other words, the right position is the position that absorbs you in all the interrelationships of body, brain, and breath, and gravity and mind, which are impossible to comprehend in any other way than by giving. Now we're going to bring that top arm down like a windmill, and we're going to lift the back heel, externally rotate, and step back. We're coming into Adho Mukha Svanasana. I'm going to take off my hoodie for this. So hopefully you're already in Adho Mukha Svanasana. But basically it's an inverted V, as I think you know. And it's an investigation. So it's quite natural to sort of retroactively name this pose down face dog, observing animals, and we can see dogs do stretch in this way. In earlier texts, not very early, we're only talking 17th century,
17th, maybe 18th century text. The pose is not dog pose, but Gajasana, elephant pose. And that's got a very different sort of focus. And we can bring them both together. So elephant pose is the focus of awareness, sensitivity in what would be the elephant's feet, which are your hands and feet. Awareness, sensitivity, carefulness. Can you believe, for people like us who don't see elephants very often, we don't tend to think of them as sort of careful, but they are exactly that. Very, very careful, very, very skillful. So bringing that in to our practice. And then there's the sort of, the intuitive stretching of animals, which I think we can bring into this as well, because an animal doesn't think about how to stretch or read about how to stretch. It's a listening, responding, right? Knees can bend and extend. If you need to rest, you can, but we're only going to be another breath or two in the pose. And then we're going to bring the shoulders forwards. Now, you might need to bring your hands a little wider, depending on how wide they were before, because we want sufficient space for the collarbones to be comfortable. And now this isn't always comfortable, but it is usually, more often than not, very good for us. So the wrists sometimes don't feel comfortable, but it's super important to stretch the wrists regularly. It helps to keep the bone density as well. So even if it's not pleasant, it is good. We're going to lower the knees very slowly, which again might not be pleasant, but it is good. Just touching the floor so lightly, it's almost frustrating, it's so light. And then we're going to lift them up again and breathing easy. And that's it. We're going to bring the knees forwards, put a block if you need to between the heels and buttocks, or two, a rolled up blanket underneath the front ankles if you need to. Great. And hands are resting on the legs and breathing through the nose. So this is the well-known Vajrasana. Vajra meaning thunderbolt. And it's just an opportunity to breathe, to roll on the shins. Eyes soft, brain soft, throat soft. Jaw soft, tongue soft, just rolling on the shins. So again, it's this principle of investigation. And because yogis are using their visceral sensations as a portal into the field, kshram is a Sanskrit word for field. And field here means the field of interdependence, which everything is part of, whether you're talking about electrons or whether you're talking about, relationship between, say, photons and electrons, or the electron field itself. Everything's interdependent on that micro level, but also on the very obvious macro level too. The candle that's burning beside me has come to this room through multiple different people's hands and vehicles and so on, and chains that go on and on. Okay, let's bring ourselves forwards to the forearms. Hands as if you're holding candles without any risk of candle wax dropping. We won't visualize it too clearly. And shoulder width apart. And then stepping back, one leg at a time. And it's very similar to what we just did, except the pressure's not through the wrists. But there is tone in the tummy in both versions. And so we want to share that work throughout the abdominal region by moving left and moving right and so on, so that we don't build up too much tension. Similar to the last version, when we had the arms straight, we're going to bring the knees down, just touch the floor very lightly, taking deep breaths. Raise one knee if you can on its own. It's just touching very lightly with the other. Then bring that down and raise the other. Still touching very lightly, and then raise both. And again, share the load if you can. Great. Knees forwards, coming up. Again, between the buttocks and heels, a block if you need it. And deep breaths. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 deep breaths. The breath's so important. The experience of the breath is like a sort of
dynamic stirring device, a spoon, that stirs the pot of our energy dynamically. So this is one way we could interpret the spirit of what is sometimes called Hatha Yoga, this sort of dynamic, moving, physical movement of subtle energy, using physical sensations to move subtle energy. Okay, now we're going to release our hands. We're going to lay on our back. So we're going to use our hands underneath the head. I'll put the microphone to one side because it sometimes vibrates a bit if you're on your back. Fingers interlaced, hands behind your head. And that's quite nice, I hope. Quite simple. But what makes a yoga practitioner is not whether the poses are simple or complicated, but how the yogi uses the posture. So we want to use it to fall into the interdependent field, which is ever present. It's the fundamental nature of all reality on the micro or macro level. We, of course, project independence onto everything. And that's a necessary thing to do. That's a very useful thing to do if you want to run a society and get agreements that make people do things together. So that's got its uses. Okay, here laying on our backs now, let's feel together the breath and its relationship, say, to the chest muscles. If the chest muscles release, it must mean that the mind is releasing too, because the mind, the body, the breath are one. It's impossible to fully release one without releasing all. Now, obviously, we could lay like this and explore this just as we are, but we're going to lift the feet up now. And if you just let your thighs drift towards your pelvis, that's slightly different from pulling them towards your pelvis. So there's a sort of surrender aspect. Sharanagati in Sanskrit means surrender or even sacrifice. Sharanagati. Lifting up the head, we'll feel the lower back really press into the floor. Very, very good for the thoracolumbar fascia. And just breathing into that. Fairly simply, we're going to extend our leg up. Something not as low down as we did last year at 45 degrees yet. We're going to build back up to that. So we're going to be a little higher than 45 degrees. That means there's a little less strain on the tummy. You know, we're building back up. It's just the beginning of January. For those who are here in real time, some people might be watching this in the future. Bend the leg and then extend the other one. So similarly, we just want to take off very gentle bite-sized chunks from these kind of things. If your neck needs to rest, that's fine. You can, but hopefully it's your abdominals that are supporting this, not your neck muscles. And one more on each side if you can. Again, go a little higher than we might do later in the year once we've all worked into it a bit more together. It's still quite a sleepy time of year, as I say, for anyone who is watching this in January, but it's a good practice anyway, any time of year. Last side. Breathing into it means falling in love with the present, like you're dancing with it. Flex back, head down, toes only down, so the heels stay up. Take deep breaths, jaw soft. Lift up the head, breathe through the nose. Eyes soft, brain soft, throat soft. And then lowering the head slowly. And then lifting it again. We're going to just do this very simple exercise. We're not yanking on the neck. 3, 4, 5 times even. Just lifting. The heels are up. The head's lifted and descended. And it's all from the abdominal muscles. Once you've done 3, 4, 5, then you rest your head and you rest the heels and you take an extra deep breath
as if I could hear it. I'd like to imagine I could hear it so deep. And hopefully that triggers another deep breath and another and another and another. And at least for a few deep breaths, the yogini or yogin, they are surrendered to the interdependent field, which has within it knowledge of everything within it. Right? When we lack knowledge, or the sort of sarvagyanam, we lack that kind of knowledge of everything, precisely because we focus on particulars instead of the whole moving, dancing field. Raise up a leg, doesn't matter which one. That one, yeah, that's a good choice. Dorsiplantar flex your foot. You can add circles if you want. You can add bending and extending. You can add shaking. Any combination that feels sufficiently loosening for you. So circling, half circling, bending, extending, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, shaking, whatever, Okay, simple, isn't it? Let's do the same with the other leg. Again, dorsiplantar, circle, half circle. If you want, these are options. Shaking, bending, extending, flexing the hip, extending the hip, etc. So once both legs feel lively, then you lift both feet up. Extend both legs out to that higher angle. We're not perpendicular to the floor, but we're not as low as 45 either. And then lift the head up again. So this should keep the work in the abdominals and help to just press the back into the floor, which will help to massage the myofascia there. Bring the legs up as you bring your head down. Take a deep breath in, deep breath out. And then another, and then another, and then another, until there's this beautiful, blissful surrender to the breath. Okay, release your hands from behind your head and either touch your knees, touch your shins, touch your ankles, or hold your toes. Obviously, that's going to depend partly on flexibility of the whole back chain, but it's also going to depend on how long your legs are. If you've got very long legs and very short arms, then there's no chance of holding your toes. So hands on the shins works fine, hands on the knees works fine as well. Either way, we're breathing into it. Either way, we're going to keep one hand in contact with the shin, the foot, whatever it's in contact with, and take the other leg away. The other arm can follow it until the hand comes down onto the thigh. Breathing is expressive, I hope. Neck is relaxed, doesn't need to be tense. And then that leg's going to come back up. Well done. Hand goes back where it was, knee, shin, toes, whatever. And then the other leg comes down with the arm following it. So on the other side, I had my hand on my shin just to show you that. Now I'm holding my toe, they're all fine. We want the balance between effort and relaxation. So there should be space, spaciousness to allow for listening. And the effort really is just to ride the wave of the moment, to sort of be ready and willing to respond. Like a surfer is willing to respond to the needs of the moment. You might say, well, is that effort or what? But obviously the surfer is using muscles, but they're riding the wave. Okay, that leg comes up. Both legs are up, hands on the shins or holding the big toes. You can wag your tail, whatever feels good. Then we're going to stretch the arms and feet away from each other, right? At a pace that suits you. Could be fast, could be slow. Hands don't have to come to the floor. They could come to blocks or something if you preferred. They could be out to the side. It's important to keep the lower back intimate or close to the floor. And when you finally land, really let go. Let everything melt entirely. And take deep breaths, natural breaths. So you've got to let the elbows bend, the legs fall away from each other. Now, much as it's a delight to just lay melted, and it is one of the purposes expressly announced as one of the purposes of Hatha Yoga, especially from the Dattatreya Yoga Shastra onwards. Might even be, I think it's even earlier too in the Amrita Siddhi. Anyway, melting yoga, Layanam, is one of the yogas mentioned in the Hatha text. Roll over, despite the fact we love that melting, roll over onto your side, and where possible, support your head with your hand. But if it's not possible, you can extend your arm and put a blanket or towels between your arm and head if you want. Extend the bottom ribs if you can, to the extent that you can. And then a little rolling is so beneficial. Rolling forwards, rolling backwards, and the purpose is always the same. Absorption into the field. So as you roll forwards and as you roll backwards, we merge with the field precisely because the rolling is challenging the gripping in the body, which itself is an expression of clinging on to specifics. Ideas about ourselves as being young or old or middle-aged or, such and such a position in a family or such and such a position in society or such and such a position in a religious group. All of these sort of subtle grips that, of course, color our vision, bias our vision, and make our ability to surf, therefore, impaired. It's like wearing blinkers. So anyway, short story, move forwards and backwards to massage out any tension and what is driving that tension, which will be some form of grasping, will also release, leaving the mind open, which we can also call available, because that sounds really positive, doesn't it? My mind is available. Now, as this is great, we could do it for ages, but we're going to come back when ready, there's no rush, to the upright, and then we're going to bring the top leg up and have a little play about, right, between the vertical and horizontal planes. Similarly, we're massaging myofascia, so any areas where it's tense are areas that are expressing a bias of the mind, because a bias of the mind will bias the body. So if we always do a certain thing, the body will always do a certain thing. And if the body always does a certain thing, and then there'll always be gripping, won't there? So you reverse engineer out of that sort of positive. Eventually the leg comes up to the upright. Doesn't have to be now, but whenever feels right. And eventually we bring the hand to the foot, if we can, and hold the big toe. And often that's enough, just to be in that position and breathing with the jaw soft. Because the yogi is using the sensations of challenging bias in the body, brain, breath to fall, patan, into the field of interdependence, which are moments where we feel content, peaceful, we might even say spiritual. Some people want to extend the leg, and you can if you want, right? It's a little or a lot or back and forwards. Again, it invites investigation. We're looking for release. That will show up in the breath. The pose is called Anantasana. Ananta is the name of the serpent couch of the Lord Vishnu. I just quite enjoy that sentence, apart from anything else. So one of the sort of main movements that have become popular over the last few hundred years is Vaishnavism, where Vishnu is seen as a sort of ultimate ground of reality.
just as in Shaivism, Shiva is seen as the ultimate ground of reality and so on. And it doesn't really matter, what you what metaphor you use for the ultimate ground of reality. It's just a way of kind of getting your mind to comprehend something way vaster than our own particular, worldview. Okay, bring the leg down if you're ready. Bring the head down if you're ready. Draw your knees up. And let's just have a little break together. So Vishnu is said between creating universes, so this gives us a sort of scale, to rest on this couch, which is made of a serpent whose name is Ananta, which means eternal. So that serpent sort of never, it's just always there, Again, this is just exercises in mind expansion. Okay, come on up. Nice and easy. Good job. Let's do the same thing on the other side. So similarly, you can use head support if you find that useful. So if your neck's tight or something, you could use a towel or a blanket like I'm showing you here for your head to go onto. The hand is supporting the head, usually around the mastoid process, which I unusually, because I've got this sort of ear problem at the moment after a difficult diving situation in Indonesia. The doctor was doing some tests on my ear using a tuning fork, which I didn't know they did. And she put it on my mastoid process, the tuning fork. Anyway, it's just a little anecdote. We're rolling while I waffle. You can be, and I recommend you do. Rolling forwards, rolling backwards, and getting into it, like looking for moments that feel, absorbing. And we could keep doing that. It is very, very beneficial because it loosens us physically, but you loosen physically, you loosen what drives the physical tensions, which is a sort of attachment, we could say, to particularities. Attachment always comes, of course, with aversion. When we're ready, the top leg will come up, similarly to on the other side. And we're going to play between the vertical and horizontal planes. The adductor brevis, magnus, longus, pectineus, gracilis, minimus, these adductor muscles on the inner thigh get massaged. And of course, all the myofascia and the superficial fascia in that area becomes hydrate. There's a flow that begins to happen. And because we know what happens in the body happens in the mind, it happens in the mind too. So you could do that as long as you want, as long as you like. If you want, if you're ready and you want to, then you can hold your big toe. And that's often plenty, more than enough. And yogis are known for being people who are easily satisfied. They're not people who need more and more and more. They're people who need less and less and less. Like, a dewdrop on a flower is like a diamond to a yogi. They're like beautiful, right? It's like it's like diamonds every morning, everywhere. Keep breathing easy. Again, there is the option, if it feels like it's part of the investigative absorption, to raise the leg. That's fine. No problem. The only thing you need to reference isn't yoga books, isn't yoga teachers, isn't colleagues in classes, but your own breath. Your own breath is what you're looking for the affirmation from. Your own breath. So breathe into it. If the breath is expressive, then it's going well. Then the physical movements must also be expressive.
expressive of contact or surrender to or with the field. Eyes soft, brain soft, throat soft. Wonderful. Those deep, 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 deep breaths. Okay. If you're like me, you could play this out for quite a while. I really enjoy it. We're going to bring the leg back down. We're going to bring the knees up and rest like we did before. Like Vishnu resting on Ananta, on the serpent couch between universes. And of course, nobody's 100% clear about what are the origins of the universe. The James Webb telescope is finding out all sorts of new and exciting things. Like, is there an origin? We can talk about the Big Bang, but what is that? So anyway, universes are mysterious places. And it's perfectly possible that there are multiverses, and they might extend in any direction, all existing at the same time, or existing along a timeline. Anyway, we can imagine, these sort of measurements of time that are sort of beyond imagination. Okay, come on up. Yeah, I realized the error of my sentence. Imagine what's beyond imagination. Anyway, so we're going to sit up. We're going to hold the big toes. And we're going to make sure there's a bit of space behind us. I've got a candle burning here for aesthetic reasons, but I must make sure I don't lean back into it. And you must make sure you don't lean back into anything that might be an obstacle behind you. Lean back and lift your feet if you're ready. And that's enough. So this is Ubhaya Padangusthasana. Ubhaya means both. Padangushta, big toes. Hold both big toes. And then play if you want. Or perhaps I should clarify, play to the extent that it triggers a challenge to the modus operandi in the body, brain, breath. In other words, stretches. They challenge the modus operandi in the body, brain, breath. So there's multiple ways in which you can play. Some people like to straighten the legs. Some people like to straighten one and not the other. Some people like to scissor them together and apart. And the term like to refers to these actions being conducive to absorption. Good. So hopefully you're like me and you could stay like this for a while. Now the next pose, in an ideal world, you might have someone there you can sit back to back with. Well, then do if you do. But you might not. I don't. So you can sit either just straight in the room like I am here with the soles of the feet together, knees apart, or with your back up against something behind you. Usually it's preferable to use a yoga block standing behind you, between you and the wall or whatever you're using. Using a person or a yoga block against a wall helps to keep the sacrum deep into the body. And that brings release around what's called the sacroiliac joint, which very much likes to be stable. It's the joint between the sacrum and the ilium. In other words, the wider wider broadened part of the vertebral column above the tailbone, where it contacts the hip bones. Anyway, if you're back to back with someone, sometimes spontaneously you start moving. And it's sort of beyond, a person doing it. There's an experiment you can do, isn't there, when you hold a piece of string with a little weight on the bottom, and you can, without moving, or certainly without consciously moving your hand,
You just visualize the string, the little weight going in a circle, and it will, or going backwards and forwards, and it will. So this is the sort of the dynamic between intention and relationship and manifestation. So in other words, your body might start to move in ways that you don't feel like you're instructing from thinking, but are more a sort of expression of intimacy with the field that ultimately moves everything. So when we move a weight on a piece of string, it's like that. It's a relationship between a relationship in the field of everything that's in the field: the weight, the string, the hand, the mind. So deep breaths. If you're back to back with someone, maybe there's spontaneous rocking. You know that the head doesn't need to get involved in at all. It's just everything is everything. And that there may be that rocking as well if you're not sitting back to back with someone. Flowing breath, responsive, subtle. Now, if you are back to back with someone, their warmth, your warmth has merged, and it's probably slightly unwelcome news to say it's time to, if you want to anyway, you could stay a bit longer if you want. It's time to think about at least gently separating. I usually put my hand on the person's back behind me so that I don't have to completely separate too quickly. And then once you have separated and you've realized what a marvelous person that is, then we're going to take our legs into a generous stride, seated. This is Upavishta, probably on 1 to 2 blocks, with the corner of the block facing forwards. The corner of the block facing forward. So just sticking out in front of the pubis. So that means that the block, instead of being straight when you sit on it, is ski-with. That means that the thighs will be able to drop down, the psoas will be able to release. You don't have to sit on a block, but many people will find it useful. We want to be equidistant from an imagined midline. So I quite like to check and recheck that. And the buttock flesh drawn out and back. If you're ready, hands cupped when you're ready. Doesn't have to be now, but in a minute. And then turn them back behind you. Roll your shoulder blades down your back. Lift up your chest. Breathe through your nose. And again, biofeedback means investigative movement. So there's a sort of nudging in. Then comes the response, which conditions further movement. And so it becomes a dance. Is it that you're nudging the body or the body's sort of moving you? It's like all the best things in life beyond thinking, unmani, beyond the mind. So keep breathing free and deep and honest. Because whatever you think, it's not it. What reality is always just beyond the mind. Of course, it's perfectly valid to really study things to a high end. And then you realize that anyway, like scientists and medical practitioners and so on. Lift and turn towards your, let's say your right foot, but it doesn't matter if you turn the other way. Feel energy releasing through to the leg that you're facing away from. And feel your toes as gently as possible, as relaxedly as possible, releasing away from each other. Lift and turn back to the other leg. Similarly, feel energy releasing into the leg you've turned away from. Similarly, let your toes feel like they're relaxing, like it's a sort of, like with that exercise with a piece of string and a little weight. You know, it's expression of subtle, of intention rather than mechanical action. We'll try bringing the fingers under the floor in front of us, but we do want to do our utmost to stay light, not to sort of dump down into the lower back at all. So staying light and breathing. For some people, coming further forwards feels fine. So, you know, there's no problem in doing that if you want. The jaw stays soft. So it's very difficult to get the tone of the communication right, because we should go as far forwards as the expression expresses. But at the same time, it's very easy to think further is better, and that's not true. Further down towards the floor is better if it's opening your breath, and worse if it's not. Right? And it's very easy to think, well, you know, because you know, such and such a yoga teacher is flexible, that I should, you know, I would be doing better if I were flexible, more flexible. But it's utterly untrue, and the reasons are pretty obvious of why that is. You know, even if you just reflect a little bit. Shorthand, all you need to do is breathe and stretch and enjoy. Do keep the spinal column open at the front. Don't come too low. Coming up when you're ready, nice and slow. Well done, everyone. Nice and slow. And hopefully you can bring your legs back together. They're not stuck like that forever. We're probably, well, let's just say we are. We're going to sit on blocks. I'm guessing most people have a couple of yoga blocks at home, but not everyone does. So it's fine to use books or even very neatly folded blankets, but books are probably better with a blanket on top. If you use books, the binding should face forwards. You also need a blanket or a towel. We're going to sit in this beautiful pose, Sukhasana. And so we're sitting on two blocks to give more elevation to the pelvis, which gives more stretch to the psoas, which is a muscle, the hip flexing, main hip flexing muscle. But we're going to add a break. In other words, we don't want the legs just to drop ad infinitum. Otherwise, they'll pull the pelvis too far forwards, and that will make the lower back compressed. So blanket under the shins, gap between the legs and pelvis, buttock flesh drawn out and back, and palms up. Breathe if you can through your nose. It's preferable. Soften your eyes and brain. Let the body move. If it wants, spontaneously. So it's this listening, responding without the biased thinking processes, and all thinking processes, even ideas that are right, are still wrong because they are particular. The only thing that's right is everything altogether. So breathing easy, moving spontaneously, investigative, and very tall in the spine, of course. Shoulder blades down. Now we're going to find the Dwadash Anta, which is the end of Dwadash is 12 and Anta is the end of 12 finger widths. So we're going to find that by measuring. You know how to do 12, right? 4 plus 4 plus 4 is 12. And that's your Dwadashanta, right? That's the space of 12. We're going to imagine we're breathing, just a visualization exercise, from there down to the bottom of the breastbone on an inhale, and on the exhale goes back up, right? So that's the simple. We can start that now. So when you breathe in, imagine it's coming from the Dwadashanta, and it ends up at the end of the inhale at the bottom of the breastbone, and then vice versa. It may be that after a breath or two, you can just sort of feel where that point is, and you don't need your hand there anymore. Simple practice to define the central channel, which is a visceral correlate to being in the middle. Being in the middle is a place before bias. In other words, it's a place where we can be open. So a few breaths like this. We can even add, to give the practice more gravity, a mantra, which will be bud, ho. Bud on the way in, ho on the way out. It just is a way of saying awake. From the root bud, B-U-D-H, we get awake. Bud, ho. Coming down from the Dwadashanta to the bottom of the breastbone and back up. And you can do that internally or externally. You can say Buddho out loud or just in the mind. Obviously, internalizing the sound means you can make it last the whole length of the breath. Otherwise, you'll have to say it at the beginning and the end of each cycle. Just 2 or 3 more rounds. And when you're ready, make the next round the last one. And simply change the cross of the legs when you're ready to. So the other leg comes in front. The blanket comes back in. We'll do a very simple practice to set up the new year as we would want it to set up. So a similar channel visualization practice. And this time we're going to imagine the left and right nostril correspond to channels. The channels run from the nostril inside the head to the top of the head, down either side of an imagined central channel, and they co-terminate at the pelvic floor. The central channel co-terminates with them, but rises right up through the center, as you might imagine, and back up to the Dwadashanta. So just to recap, 3 channels. 2 that correspond to each nostril, they come sort of inside the body up and then back down, co-terminating at the pelvic floor, and a central one. Every time we breathe in, we're going to imagine green light. every time, whether it's the left channel, right channel, or middle channel. And we're going to tell ourselves that that green light is purifying. When we breathe out, depending on which channel we breathe in through, the color of the light will be different. So the first practice will be imagining that you're breathing in green light through the left nostril and channel. It goes down to the pelvic floor. You sort of hold the breath for a moment. When you imagine it reaching the pelvic floor, you shift it over to the opposite channel. It rises up and then out. So it's green on the way in, it's green through, it's green on the way out. But when it hits the air, as it were, it comes out as blue light or blue smoke. And this practice that we'll do just 3 times on this side, on left nostril down, cross and out. We imagine, we tell ourselves that we are purifying obstacles and obscurations to do with the past and to do with aversion and to do with male energy, which is not to do with being a man or a woman, but a particular kind of energy in these tantras. So purifying obstacles and obscurations to do with the past and to do with aversion and to do with male energy. We'll breathe in green light through the left nostril, through the left channel, down to the pelvic floor. You can do it as I'm talking. It shifts across at the bottom while you hold your breath for a moment. It comes back out, that green light, through the opposite channel. And as it hits the air, it comes out as blue smoke or blue light. And it's purifying. We're going to do it 3 times in your own time. Obstacles and obscurations to do with the past. Always green light coming in, always green light as it moves through the channels. Blue smoke as it comes out of the right nostril, or blue light. Obviously, when you've completed 3 rounds, you just go to normal breathing. Our next practice will be identical, but in reverse. In other words, green light coming in this time through the right nostril, down through the right channel. Holding the breath, it moves across channels at the pelvic floor, rises up. That green light moves up through the opposite channel. This time it comes out as pink light or pink smoke. And this is to do with obstacles and obscurations, to do with the future, to do with craving, and to do with female energy. And again, I'll remind us that doesn't mean male or female as in genders of Homo sapien or other creatures, but it's a specific term that refers to a specific kind of energy. So when we're ready, we can begin through the right nostril, green light. Imagine it going down to the pelvic floor, shifting across, coming up the opposite channel and out as pink light or pink smoke. Obstacles to do with the future are being purified. Obstacles to do with craving, being purified. Again, when you've done 3, it's normal breath, and then an obvious conclusion. And that obvious conclusion is both nostrils simultaneously down to the pelvic floor where the energy commingles. Then it comes up through the central channel of this green light, purifying all the way through the central channel, comes out of the crown of your head like it's black smoke, it's carbon neutral, no harm to the environment is done. It's like soot, being cleaned out from your central channel. It's like having the chimney sweep coming round. So, and this is purifying obstacles and obscurations to do with the present and to do with ignorance. So when you're ready, 3 rounds, green light, green light, green light, black smoke. Okay, when you're ready. Pushing that green light up through the central channel, and it comes out. All that sort of obstacles, obscurations come out of the crown of the head. 3 rounds of this, of course. when you finish, just, it's traditional to sit in what Tibetans call Rigpa, which is the Tibetan version of the Sanskrit word vidya, sort of middle state of clear vision. Obviously, it would be great to sit longer, but we're going to lay down for a moment to let all that energy just soak up into the body. So when you're ready, laying down on your back, you can use the blocks that you sat on in combination with a blanket or towel rolled up to support the back of your knees. That can be very, very nice. Obviously, you're at home, so hopefully you've got enough stuff to keep you warm, like that. It can go like that at the back of the knees. Head support should be taken if your head tips back. Lay as comfortably as we can on our backs with the arms a good distance from the body, palms facing up. Scooting the shoulder blades under, so the chest has this buoyancy to it, lovely buoyancy to it. It's lovely, isn't it, just to let go completely, just like totally, letting go of the body means letting go of the tensions that drive the body, which are expectations to do with the future and the past, expectations to do with ideas about oneself, ideals that one has for oneself or that one feels others have for oneself. Letting go of gender, of age, of social status, letting go of personality, expectations of personality, limitations of personality, letting go of history. And of course, we experience a beautiful correlation. The more letting go, the more expansion, until the mind feels like there are no edges, no limits, nothing that can therefore come and go, nothing that can therefore begin and end. Being at home, of course, means that you can lay as long as you've got to lay. And I'd like to think that you could have at least another 5 minutes or so. If you need to come out on time, you need the class to be an hour long, then now would be the time to wiggle the toes and the fingers. But otherwise, let that happen when it happens, in 5 minutes or whatever, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, any amount of time. But when you're ready, the fingers will wiggle, the toes will wiggle. There'll be organic stretches. That could be now or it could be in a bit. And after that, one will bend the legs, soles of the feet will come to the floor. The buttocks scoot under, and then we'll be rolling. First to the left with the knees up, tummy soft. And then to the right. So even though some of you, I'm sure, will lay on longer, I'll say my farewells and thanks. You don't have to get up or anything, but thank you for coming back. 2023, we're still doing it. Still doing it. Great to see you. Apologies for the deafness. I hope it meant the volumes were okay for you. And do text me if you any questions or anything you want to ask. But otherwise, I'll see you very soon, I hope. Maybe in real life even. We've got lots of yoga holidays this year. In Morocco in May, and July we're going to France. So yeah, come along, and English holidays as well. They're all on the Vajrasati website. I hope you can come to some, because I want to give you a hug in real life. See you, gang.
Namaste, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy New Year.